Hi, I'm Tim Walsh, and I'm going to show you how to make some carrot cake muffins that are gluten-free and sugar-free. They're little fat bombs, so if you want something really quick for breakfast that's going to satisfy you all the way to lunch, 1 to 2 of these is going to do the trick, and we're going to make up a dozen today. It's really easy. We're going to start with 1 1/4 cups almond flour. Now, I'll caution you, almond flour is different than traditional flour. When you're measuring it based on volume, so I just said 1 1/4 cups, you actually want to really pack it into the measuring cup. It's not something that's meant to be scooped lightly. If you scoop it really lightly, you're going to get a really soggy muffin at the end, and it's not that pleasant. So, to help you out, you have the option of 1 1/4 cups of almond flour, or the same measurement when it's packed correctly is about 175 grams. So if you measure that out, you don't have to worry about packing it in. But we're going to add it to this bowl here, which is going to be our dry ingredients bowl. So 1 1/2 or 1 1/4 cups almond flour. Then we want 2 tablespoons coconut flour. Add that in. As you've noticed, all of these things are already pre-measured. Really saves you a lot of time. I have 1/2 a teaspoon of baking soda. Now, if you find that your baking soda, or especially your baking powder, is clumping on you, all you have to do is, before you add it to the rest of the mixture, run it through a little sifter, and it'll break up any of those clumps. This is looking pretty good. It doesn't need to be broken up, so I can just add that directly. After the baking soda, we want some salt, somewhere between 1/4 teaspoon to maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon if you're trying to go a little bit lighter. I like salt in my food. I like the flavors to really pop. When your food's really muted and boring, there's 2 things that are typically, well, 3 things that could be missing. You could be missing salt, you could be missing fat, and you could be missing acid. In this case, we're not worried about acid. If your flavors are boring, that means you need to increase your salt or improve your fat. So we're going to add that salt, and that was, again, I'm using 1/8 of a teaspoon, but no, actually I'm using a 1/4 of a teaspoon, but you can use 1/8 and that'll work fine. And then we want 1 1/2 teaspoons of cinnamon. After that, we want, let's see, I believe it is 1/2 a teaspoon of ground nutmeg. There we go. And then 1/2 a teaspoon of ground ginger rather than nutmeg. Nutmeg's next. I got ahead of myself. When it comes to nutmeg, it's one of those things that you always buy pre-ground until you finally buy the whole version and grind that up and then realize how much better it is and you never go back. So start with whole nutmegs. And this, you want a 1/4 teaspoon of this. Just use a little microplane to grind it up. Sometimes if you're having trouble estimating how much you get when you grind this, just hold up a little measuring cup. So if you got, I've got mine right here. So I want, what, a 1/4 teaspoon? So that's only this little guy. If I hold it up to here, then when I'm grinding, I can look at how much I've ground away, and I have a better idea of how much I actually just ground up. And I know, like, hey, this is the right amount. Plus, you can almost never have too much nutmeg because it's amazing, so feel free to add too much. You can see I probably just took about 1/3 of that guy off, and that's plenty. All right, so those are all of our dry ingredients. We're going to set this aside for a moment, and now we're going to start doing our wet ingredients. You always want to mix all your dry ingredients and all your wet ingredients separately, and then combine them. So for the wet ingredients, we have 2 eggs. You want to make these a little bit healthier. I suggest you get omega-3 or even better pastured eggs. There's just a lot more nutrients, and the chickens weren't fed a ton of corn and soy. So it's a lot better for you. Then we add some oil. So you can use avocado oil, MCT oil, or coconut oil for this. I'm going to use avocado oil, and we need 1/3 cup of avocado oil. And after that, we need 2/3 cup of unsweetened coconut milk. So just use the same cup. It all adds up to 1 cup, so you don't have to dirty more utensils. All right, pour that right in. And then after this, we have an ingredient called Swerve. That's our alternative sweetener. It's a sugar alcohol called erythritol. And I forgot to measure it out, so I'm going to do it for you right now. I got 1/3 cup Swerve. Yes. Perfect. These are already clean. They're just sitting in the sink, so they're out of the way of the camera, which did not work out. All right. Looks like this. It works pretty well. It's not quite as sweet as sugar, but we don't necessarily want these to be little cakes. They're more like muffins. So only a little bit of sweetness, nothing too crazy. It dissolves a lot like sugar. So often you can just do a straight replacement of sugar to Swerve, or if you can't find this brand, just find something called erythritol. It's basically the same thing. All right, we add our Swerve. And then we have 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Add that right in. Great, that is all of our wet ingredients. We're gonna bring the dry ingredients back over here. And we wanna whisk this up so that everything's pretty homogeneous. You'll notice if you look in there, there's a lot of clumps, and that's because the almond flour tends to clump up a little bit more. So you might have to whisk this more than you are used to for most of your baking, but it's not too bad. And if you're not gonna end up with like weird dry clumps that are gonna taste weird. All right. All right, so to deal with minor interruption, our dry ingredients are all whisked up, and then we've got our wet ingredients over here. Just whisk these up until it's homogeneous. That's all it takes. Looks like this. All right, and we're gonna add our wet to our dry. And I like to use a spatula just to make sure we get as much of this as possible. You don't have to be a superhero, but if you get more rather than less, it just saves you time later. All right, set that aside. And then we whisk this together. Let's go around the outside, catch all the dry ingredients. Get them evenly incorporated into the wet. All right, it's evenly incorporated, and we are good there. Next, we want to add our carrots. So you want to grate 2 large carrots. You might be tempted to use a standing grater, the kind of thing you might use for cheese. That's going to take you forever. If you've got a food processor with a grating attachment, that's awesome, use that. If you do not, the next best thing is actually just take your carrot and a vegetable peeler. So, you've peeled the outside already, got the dirt off. Take your carrot and a vegetable peeler and just shave off the slicing, shave off some slices. If you want to go really quick, you go back and forth, and that takes care of your carrot peels really quickly. And then all you do is, on a cutting board, chop it up a couple times with a knife. It's the same thing as if you grated it. It takes maybe 1/10 of the time as if you use like a cheese grater. All right, so I'm just gonna set those aside. So now we add our carrots. And optionally, if you want, you don't have to, but I like to, you can add 1/4 cup of nuts. You might want to use walnuts. I like to use a mixture that I just tend to have around the house, which is a mixture of walnuts, macadamia, pistachio, and pecan. You just throw those in, and all we do is fold these in. You don't need to like whisk it vigorously. You're just looking for a homogeneous mixture. All right, that's all mixed up. And then we add it to our muffin tins. So you do want to use some paper liners. And I'm not going to do all these in front of you, but I will show you what I do to make it a little bit easier to fill them, because filling muffin tins is my least favorite part of making muffins. It just seems more difficult than it should be. So I use like a 1/2 cup scooper, and that gets me about the right amount to drop into there. And if I end up with too much, just scoop it back a little. Move on to the next one. There you go. All right, I'm going to finish the rest of these on the side. After you fill these, you pop it into your oven, which should be preheated to 350 degrees, and you want it in there for about 25 minutes. When you hit the 25-minute mark, take a little bamboo skewer or a toothpick or something, poke it into one of the muffins. If it comes out and it doesn't have dough on it or anything, it's done. Take it out. You can set these on the counter and let them cool for 15 minutes or so before you take them out of the tin, and they're ready to eat at any time. They're delicious. They're super fast. They're super filling. So like, or satisfying is a better way of putting it. 1 to 2 of these for breakfast. You're totally set till lunch. So I'm going to finish these up, throw them in the oven, and I'll show you what the final product looks like. Our muffins just came out of the oven. Here is a nice little shot what they look like. You see a lot of the carrot coming through. You want an idea of how to test for doneness. You take a skewer, and you literally just came out. You just stab anywhere, pull out, and as you can see, there isn't any doughiness on there. There's like a crumb. Crumbs are fine. You just don't want dough. That's it. Leave these out on the counter to cool for 10-15 minutes so you can pop them out of the tin. Store them in an airtight container. They last in the fridge for about 5 days. You throw them in the freezer, they'll last you a couple weeks. All right, enjoy making your very own carrot cake muffins, which are gluten and sugar free. Take care.